After a few not so great episodes, shall we say, I was really pleasantly surprised by the Rockstar. Even though it's part of the genre where I know it's, a for kids thing, this feels a little more like it was by kids. It feels a little more genuine to how you sort of, as a kid playing Power Rangers, would like imprint yourself on the avatar of one of these, because essentially Jeremy imprints himself on the avatar of Jason, but Jason is the Red Ranger, not the Jason he knows, which is kind of nice. They didn't feel like they had to shoehorn Tommy into the episode, and I don't actually mind the use of Bulk because um, Bulk is actually useful as an object lesson. I still don't know that I like all the pot shots they take at Bulk and Skull. I know they bring it on themselves sometimes, but I do still feel like they could be their better angels a little bit. It's neither here nor there. It's sort of a part of the time period of the show. I really like that both Scorpina and Rockstar, and even though I have questions about the origin of Rockstar, Scorpina and Rockstar are actually useful bad guys. They make sense. Um, it didn't feel like after Rockstar was destroyed that um, Goldar being in the episode made the battle too heavy, which is kind of nice. It was good use of the power sword. Um, the Mirror of Destruction is something where now, as a TTRPG, you could do the shards of the Mirror of Destruction or bring them into your universe if you're playing in your own universe. You could bring in a duplicate. This is something that, though it's probably Sentai based, is very useful for a Americanized Power Ranger game because it makes sense. I don't know why you would make them, but a Mirror of Destruction, you open the case after finding it on a map and you use it to destroy even something like super putties, which we know about in universe being stronger than normal putties. Um, yeah, it all works really narratively. I was a little skeptical because I'd been saying for a while I don't really know anything about Jason. Like, I was getting to a point where I was like, why did they kind of cast him? But now, kind of given the freedom of working without the group and then coming back to the group in an essence, you can see where Jason's quiet thoughtfulness actually is an asset in a world in which a lot of like crazy things happen around him. Um, there's a good use of getting Billy to go searching for cousin Jeremy in this as well, to have him join later in the morph when he needs to. They did just this episode is puzzlingly good after so many not being. This reminds me a little bit of Foul Play in the Sky, like when they had the episode for Kimberly, which was at least 10 episodes ago at this point, really. Um, I feel really pleased with how this episode went as a viewer. Like this is something you could show someone to show them kind of the best of the Power Rangers without having to explain things. Um, it also does showcase a little bit of the town's attitude toward being a town infested by like being under constant barrage. Is that it feels almost like there's a willfulness of not knowing who the Power Rangers are when it's kind of still the worst kept secret in town, but like kind of it's sort of the Spider-Man agreement where you know who Spider-Man is, but you just don't say anything because they're doing their job. Um, yeah, I really liked it. I was a little worried that Cousin Jeremy was gonna go a little bit of um, kind of that annoying cousin route, but there was such a kindness and a naturalness. Like you could easily see Jeremy having come back for the movie instead of the kid they had, or coming back to be the Blue Turbo Ranger later. You wouldn't want him as the Gold Ranger, obviously, but you could see where this kid in particular has some talent. He takes after Jason in a way. There's a really good use of sort of that Karate Kid syndrome. It is a little heavy-handed, the metaphor about what martial arts can do. But again, in the early 90s, when they were really trying to make this happen, and this was part of a healthy living movement, and karate was kind of seen as the way to do that, especially for boys, it was very gendered, at least where I lived. And maybe in other places it wasn't. But yeah, it was a good use of all the Rangers. I didn't miss Tommy in this episode, and Scorpina was back to being a very useful villain. I do think Scorpina's kind of there, kind of not there thing is a little weird. I know why, because they had so much footage with her, they sort of had to make her, but they don't always utilize her as a threat. So she was an appropriate threat this time. It feels very natural to know that in the Sentai version, Goldar and Scorpina's characters are married, and here it works. You can see why Scorpina is such a threat still. Um, Scorpina creates Rockstar as well. Rockstar is not a Finster-based monster. It's a Scorpina-based monster, which is interesting because we don't see that or think about it very much. But Squad and Babu have the ability to make potions. Goldar is a warrior from his own planet. That's very clear. Finster makes these creatures, and there's a lot, especially in Boom Comics, about his origin story now. But the reality is that we don't know much about Scorpina or a lot of these Monster of the Weeks that come from different planets, some of which even Zordon knows about. So it really, creatures like Rockstar, without knowing about them, you could bring them back, you could make some decisions, you could leave it really mysterious, but they work. Um, and he's a real threat. The kind of psychic rock thing that he does where he throws these rocks and they are actually like weighing people down. And this is a great moment for Billy too, because it showcases his physical strength, because he's able to take a rock off of Jason that is squishing Jason, where it takes Kimberly and Trini together to get the other rock off of Jason. So it works out really well to showcase. It's a good showcase for all the characters. It even has a great moment for Trini, where she's taking a gourmet cooking class, we hear, but she's made a tarte du snail. It's some sort of like, and it's just clearly one of those things a teenager would get wrong, but not played in a way where it's demoralizing humor, but sort of like, oh, I've learned something about Trini, and I've learned something about how the Rangers are kind to each other in community, even when things have gone off the rails a little bit. The Rockstar episode I heartily recommend. It comes in really high. It actually cracked the. I was getting worried nothing was going to crack the top six list. So I'm happy to say that that changed. I am excited to think about the Mirror Destruction and the Rockstar as two things that I could incorporate later into different versions of my game. Um, the Rockstar also, though it's a very simple, is a very kind of pleasing monster because it really is sort of just a rock golem. They didn't really try hard to sculpt a face. It's vaguely humanoid, but it's not trying to like overshadow a Scorpina. It is clearly its own thing, though. You don't get a lot about it. You just know it's a threat. It's kind of appropriate for the age group, but it still works when you watch this as an older person. Um, the locations thematically, it's really interesting to do this all. Pretty much the entire show, except for the ending bumper, takes place in like a beach scenario. So there's a really good use of blending of the American footage and the Japanese footage. The transition is really nice. I'm sure the Rangers enjoyed a day by the beach. The actors did. It was a really good episode for Austin St. John as well as Jason, because I hadn't realized that this is sort of what they were doing because there was always so much going on. But there's kind of the straight man energy that they've given to him as the leader, where his thoughtfulness means that he's sort of the calm in the storm surrounding all of these things. And I think that's why Tommy didn't work, because Tommy sort of has that same energy. But it actually does kind of balance the team nicely. The idea of being able to use brains over brawn in his particular way, which is the message of the episode, is really great. It doesn't necessarily have to be tied into martial arts, but it is. It complements everything I've seen from the rest of the Rangers. Um, I will say that I have not, I didn't live in California long when I lived in California, but I'm pretty sure if there's an earthquake, are you are you supposed to stop driving when it's an earthquake big enough to shake the earth the way this earthquake did? I don't know. It's nice to see the rad bug again, I guess. Uh, Overall, this was a really like, I don't want to use the word charming because it sounds derogatory, but this is a charming, really good Power Ranger episode where it could have drug, but they kept the beats really nice. Not necessarily typed, they kept it nice. We got to see a lot of how Jason probably lived his life before he was a ranger. Um, because nothing he does is unexpected to Jeremy. He obviously is invested in his family. Um, I was ready to complain and be like, I've learned more from the Jason themed one shot in the Power Ranger TTRPG, but I feel like here I learned a lot about Jason and how he relates to people outside of being a ranger. And even if he hadn't been called, he would still be a great ranger ally. Like he can take on, and he's taught Jeremy enough that Jeremy can kind of take on a super putty, which is interesting. And it doesn't feel the same way that Buffy season 7 felt, where they forgot that their Uruk-hai vampires were supposed to be like indestructible, even to Buffy in some ways. Yeah, no, it was super good. I really enjoyed it. It was a good use of Scorpina. It was a good use of pretty much everyone but Finster and Tommy. Um, and they didn't miss Tommy in this episode. I'm glad they didn't try to jam him in. We have a Tommy themed episode coming up. I do know that. But if you haven't seen the Rockstar, recommend it for your rewatch of the Power Rangers. I'm glad to say it cracked at least the top 10, if not higher. No spoilers. Uh, but we'll see you next time. And as Zordon likes to say, because no one's meddling with him this week, may the power protect you.